how it's squeezing everyday Americans for every nickel and dime they have. Added that to the terrible inflation that we had since that hasn't been this bad since the 1970s. With all of us working or will working near in the near future, we will soon see the difficulties that many working people have today for us to make a living for ourselves. As a person who's majoring in history, I have done extensive research about how on the topics of unions and how it has affected the United States and how it has affected everyone in the country over the last 100 years. Unions in the United States are necessary for the overall health of our country. For that, let's start off with wages. Money is the most important thing about a job. Everyone likes money, and we're always better off with it rather than not having it. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a website from the United States government, union members often make more money than non-union workers by nearly 20%. For example, if you're making $1,000 per paycheck, so every 2 weeks or so, let's make it really simple, and you bump it up 20%, that's an extra $200 that you're getting by being in a union. And with that extra $200 you're getting per paycheck, you're making an extra $400 per month, which is equivalent to $4,800 a year that you got extra from just being part of a union rather than not being part of a union. With that extra money, not only do you make more money to keep for yourself, you can also use that same money to put it back into the overall economy that will help the United States. Unions are also good at creating competition, either between themselves or industries where there's also non-union members as well. For example, if you work at an office and they're unionized and you're getting paid more, and then a non-union office and their workers see that they're doing nearly the exact same job as the other unionized workers, but they're not unionized, they might think, oh, if we unionize, we'll probably get better wages. Companies see that and they know, because most companies, well, mostly all of companies don't want unions because they want to have greater control over their own employees. So with that in mind, most non-union companies will either raise their wages to prevent their workers from getting dissatisfied with them, and it will help them keep the idea of unions out of the picture. With that, the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations has a really large union that is in the United States. It has been in the country for over 50 years. They say that union members are always entitled to higher raises and more frequent raises compared to their non-union members. With that, they can always keep them ahead of inflation that has always occurred every year at around 2%, according to the Federal Reserve. And then also when times are tough like now, where inflation is extremely high, the regular wages from unions will always be much higher than their non-union counterparts, which makes companies keep their workforce the same rather than losing at a higher turnover rate, which will cost the company more money in the long term. Moving on to the middle class. The middle class, the backbone of the United States economy, where most Americans fall into it in the social structure. Others fall on the higher end, some fall on the lower end, where it's the working poor. The working poor is a term used by people who work for a living. They usually work full-time, either one or two jobs full-time, and they don't make enough money to make their ends meet, which is a problem because most of Americans are starting to get pushed into that section every year as wage inequality keeps going higher and higher. From the picture that we see, union membership has fallen drastically since the late 60s to the 70s, and then it started to drop even more into the 80s. What you can see there also is the inverse effect on companies and the top 10 richest people in America. As you can see, that has skyrocketed up ever since. So we can see that from that image that unions protect the middle class. And according to American Progress Action, the unionized workers are more likely to receive benefits from their employer that also narrow the wage gap for women and minorities, since those groups are usually marginalized the most and they usually get the worst end of the stick when it comes to wages. With that in mind, it can eliminate the working poor in a unique community, since if a community is more unionized, the community is more likely to have less poverty and more workers who are able to meet the needs of other people, especially their family members and the overall health of the community. From The Stand, a news organization from the state of Washington, unionized workers are also closing the gap between the U.S. and the rest of the industrialized world. Since in the United States, Although most jobs give us benefits such as healthcare and vacation time and some maternity leave at some companies, while healthcare is required if you're working full time, vacation time and maternity leave is not required by law. So that means that employers can offer it or they don't have to offer it, but most do since it's been competitive over the last couple of decades. While the rest of the world, they have much bigger benefit packages where they have better health care, they have maternity leave that lasts months, and they have sick time that lasts also months, and vacation times that can last months or even longer than that. And from the same place for the stand, they also say that workers who are in a union are entitled to a pension, which a pension is better than a 401k since a pension is based on the employer giving you money for your pension when you retire, rather than a 401k, which is based on you, the employee, who has to contribute to that plan every time they get paid, and whenever they get older and their pension and their 401k, is a lot bigger, they can cash out then. But a 401k is based off of the stock market. So if the 401k fails and the stock market fails, you'll most likely lose your entire retirement, which is not good, especially when you don't have any backing from the government or anyone else. To conclude, I have showed you why unions are important to the U.S. What we learned from unions, they increase wages for their own workers and they increase competition from non-union workers, where they would force to increase their wages and increase their benefits so their workers don't have the idea of unionizing, even though unionizing will be way better than non-unionizing. And the next time you think about unions, think about it. If you want to join a union, it's best to join a union in your own company and start it within there rather than finding your own. Since if you form a union at your own job, it will help your company better than what you think it will.